The left is freaking out over the dismissal of FBI Director James Comey. Still, 48 hours after the news broke of his firing by President Trump, they're spewing out so much hypocrisy, you can almost drown in it.
I think that there's just no doubt, given the timing, that the reason that Comey was fired was because Donald Trump wants to cut off any investigation into any connections that he has with his campaign and connections to the Russians.
This is not just a scandal. The president's actions are neither Republican nor Democratic. They're authoritarian.
So this is very dangerous for American democracy. Yes, I thought then that and I think now that what he did last year was very wrong, but that was last year. Now he's fired by the person he's investigating, who will now appoint his investigator. That's intolerable.
If this were Hillary Clinton, the Republicans would be trying to impeach her right now.
And naturally, the mainstream media, in turn, is spinning a false narrative about the death of the president's agenda and now unbreakable strife in Congress, all for a president using his lawful authority to fire a man virtually no one on either side of the aisle thought was fit for the job anymore. Ebony, I want to ask you about this. Do you think that I know the answer to this, but do you think the Democrats are going to use this controversy, call it a scandal, call it a crisis of constitutional crisis, to slow walk President Trump's agenda?
Well, 100% yes. Obviously, we know that because they have become the party of resist for various reasons. But here's the issue. Here's what's wrong with what Elizabeth Warren said. When we all sat on this panel, almost in full agreement that we don't believe anything about this investigation is going to stop just because Jim Comey is gone. And Liz Warren, she's a lawyer. She knows that. So at that point, that looks like a talking point to me.
Jamila, McCabe today said he cannot confirm that there was any request made at all, and they don't typically request resources. So the firing of Comey can't be tied to a request for more resources, at least not from internally at the FBI.
Okay, but that again misses the larger point here. The larger point is that, look, this makes the American people, to whom Donald Trump is accountable as our head of government, it makes the American people say, well, hold on. Explain what's going on. This guy's investigating you, Mr. President. Why did you get rid of him? I don't understand. And what this means is that our democracy requires an answer to that question.
But Jamila, is the question why did you fire him, or why did you fire him now?
Why did you fire him now? We know that he's looking into you.
The investigation goes on, Jamila.
It goes on, and it needs to go on. But what needs to happen? And Fox needs to answer, CNN needs to answer, MSNBC needs to answer to the American voter. Here's what is at stake. Here's why this matters. If there is collusion with a foreign power, if the Russians involve themselves in your free and fair election, this is what it means. The UN gets involved in other stuff.
I'm going to bring Kat in, but Jamila, you can't throw that out there. There is no collusion. There's no proof of collusion. So
it's only been 10 months.
Part of this equation.
It's only been 10 months, and Donald Trump seems to be so against this investigation. If there was nothing going on, and it were me, I'd say investigate away, investigate all day long, look into it, there's nothing to hide. He might be irritated by it, he may not be used to these kinds of things, because it's very different than being a CEO to be the president and be under these kinds of accusations, but everybody should be on the same side of let's make sure that the people who do these kinds of investigations for a living are telling us the investigation's over. They know better than any of us would know.
And Kat, Judge, it goes on. You replaced the FBI director, or you're about to replace the director. Sure. The agents are still in the field investigating.
They will continue to investigate. And as you started with the discussion about the Democrats now just yelling and screaming about, I know the clip after clip after clip. I saw the one with Chris Matthews, a whiff of fascism, like only he can say. The reality, I think, is on both sides, Republican and Democrat, politicians know that the only way to get your base out to vote for you is to keep them angry. And so anytime something like this comes out, even if they don't believe it's true, even if they've already gotten reports from the FBI and have heard that there's no evidence of any tie to Russia or any collusion with Russia, pounding that argument every day gets your base angry, and an angry base turns out to vote. An indifferent base doesn't turn out to vote. And unfortunately, that's something that I think both sides do, and is dividing our country further and further apart.
But does that obstruct the Trump agenda? We're already hearing people saying, well, okay, so we have this going on. We're going to have to hold off on health care for a while, and when you hold off on health care, you got to hold off on tax reform.
I don't think it should slow anything down because one thing doesn't have anything to do with the other. The investigators.
But if you're a
FBI's
Democrat, you can use it to your advantage to slow walk.
Well, yeah, of course, they can
anyway.
obstruct and say we're not going to do anything until you do this because obviously this investigation has been tarnished. But there's only so many things they could obstruct, and they can obstruct anyway. They obstructed on Garner's nomination.
And that's my point, E. I think at this point the party has decided they are going to be resistant in totality. So I don't think this moves that football necessarily any further down the field. I would say this, if we're talking politics, if I'm advising the Dem Party, I would say focus on the timing issue and ask those legitimate questions. What I don't think serves them is to kind of play revisionist historians around the Comey issue itself and try to make Jim Comey into some hero that clearly they never thought he was either.
And we should all just kind of wait and see to an extent who Trump appoints. You know, he has the interim right now, but who he appoints, that's going to be a huge issue.
It doesn't matter who he appoints. They're going to obstruct it.
It's going to be a huge issue. If he tries to appoint somebody who's a Republican, regardless of how qualified they are for the job, then everyone's going to say, see, he's doing it again. And optics do matter. They absolutely matter.
All right. We're going to leave it right there. And